Bitcoiners, hope you're doing great. P-Man Van, indeed, the sun is up. We got mega sunrise here in Quebec. We're doing great. Can't go wrong with that kind of sunrise. We got a coffee from Bitcoin Graffiti. We got a good morning team from Enmity. We got a crazy thumbnail from Bitcoin Graffiti, and he asks, was that a long prompt? Not at all. It was a courageous lion, a clown, and an aircraft carrier. I think those were the only, prompting, if you guys need some tips, simple is better. Any word you put in there, it doesn't really understand it, right? So it'll throw up the stupidest stuff. I had a hell of a time yesterday trying to get it to do the Twitter logo. Don't bother putting the word bird in there. You'll get closer without saying it's a bird. So there you go. So no, very, very clean and easy. That's my, I'm not sure if I'm right about prompt engineering, but everything that I've done so far, they get better. Especially the image ones, fewer words equals better, more accurate images. So if you can get it down to a few words, you're really going to get what you want. HBDC says, good morning, CK. HBDC says, gives me Wizard of Oz vibes. That's kind of what I was going for. Bitcoin Graffiti says, well, got news for you, sir. Indeed. I did an episode, in fact, how Bitcoin Graffiti became a regular joiner of the Breakup was because he's involved with the Geyser folks because they funded his great idea to create a Bitcoin version of Wizard of Oz. And I had done a Wizard of Oz episode, and we had someone in common. Brad Mills is his name. So if you guys don't know who Brad Mills is, just a great Canadian. Love the guy. He'll be a speaker at Bitcoin Miami next week. So Brad Mills, I guess, introed the content to Bitcoin Graffiti, and Bitcoin Graffiti has been one of the best, most consistent people to come, and always in the comments with some interesting stuff. And he does great work. So if you guys want to see his breakdown, I think he publishes on Citadel 21. But do indeed read it because it's some amazing stuff. The correlation between, a lot of you might not know this, Wizard of Oz actually written about bimetallism, actually about the topsy-turvy time before the Federal Reserve was created. Written in the late 1800s, early 1900s, I think published in 1901 or 1900 or something, sometime around then. But the whole political climate of that, now, of course, the Federal Reserve doesn't come till 1912, 1913. So this is the time just before that when America existed on bimetal standards, so silver and gold. And if you didn't know, the movie, which used the ruby red slippers, fake. The truth was that they were silver slippers on a gold path. That's sort of how you know. But that's all great stuff, right? And if you want to know, it's not just fake movies that get made, right? We got a lot of fake news. There's so much. So, but first, indeed, the sun is up. Bitcoin's running. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Can't leave you guys hanging on the coffee, right? Can't leave you guys hanging on the coffee. So, everyone's sick of telling me the story. They think I made it up. Yeah. All right. So, the fakest news I could find today, it's next level fake. I don't even know how this is possible. We're going to try and get into it, but you got to laugh, right? So this is from the New York Times. Please, someone try to help me make sense of this. We'll do our best. Well, I think I can. It's just depressing. So here you go. House Republican. You know what? I'm going to read one more before, because that has everything to do with what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to read one before because these ones are good and don't really connect to everything else that I'm talking about. So this is from MSNBC. Opinion: the GOP and the Grim Reaper are working hand in hand. And what they decided, Wajahat Ali, pardon me if I pronounce that, Wajahat Ali. It seems this is a quote from the actual article. They published this. It seems the only hope left for gun control in red states is to hide all the bullets in books written by Black people. That's a real article. So, not to be outdone, they had to talk a bit about Vivek on MSNBC as well. So Vivek, a speaker at Bitcoin 2023. Vivek Ramaswamy's surprising surge is tied to his extremism. So that's why he's doing so well. It's because he's extreme. So maybe. But here's the one we were waiting for. Here's the one that I mean, please help. Please help me. Because it's a lot for the brain to process. So House Republican report finds no evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden. After months of investigation and many public accusations of corruption against Mr. Biden and his family, the first report of the Premier House GOP inquiry showed no proof of such conduct. So that's the headline. In other news, one of the congressmen on the chairman on that committee had this tweet thread because they actually released a bunch of stuff yesterday. So here's what they said. So Congressman Nick Langworthy says, I am proud to join Chairman James Comer and my fellow GOP oversight colleagues to reveal the explosive details of Biden's business dealings. We have uncovered a network of over 20 companies formed by the Bidens and their associates. Most of these companies were LLCs and formed when Joe Biden was vice president. So far, we have traced $10 million in payments from foreign nationals and their associates. What did they do to earn this money? All signs point to selling influence and access. Our investigation will continue, and we will not rest until every last detail of this corrupt enterprise is revealed to the American people. And all kinds of people talking about it. So the New York Times had their headline, I guess. No one found anything, but a lot of people found other stuff. So who knows what they were looking at. Radar hits, breaking U.S. House Oversight Committee to release findings about influence peddling and everything else that went on. So Technofog actually breaks it down, right? So this is pretty good. The Biden money laundering operation. The House oversight investigation into the Bidens heats up, and they go into some of the details here. So it's a lot of LLCs and shell companies. And if you would, I have a bunch of LLCs. A lot of people do. I do it so that, I can stay a little ahead of the tax filing, right? It's just easier to file if you have more than one, and you don't want to get too backed up on it. If they live for too long, then you get in a little bit of trouble where you got to start doing more frequent tax payments. So if you just start a new one, you can avoid that. So my thing's scammy. I'm saying it straight up, scammy. We'll talk about that in a second. But not quite the same level of scamminess that this one has. So he's talking about the 36-page memo. This is Technofog on his Substack, talking all about the family members and the role of those family members in both foreign and domestic business practices. And they discovered evidence indicative of influence peddling and financial deception. And here are some of the highlights. So bank records show that the Biden family, their business associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign national companies. The committee identified payments to Biden family members, mostly while Biden was vice president, by the way. So most of this happens when he's vice president. The Biden family took part in a type of money laundering operation where foreign companies, some with ties to Chinese intelligence, would send millions of dollars to the companies of Biden business associates. Those businesses, which acted as Biden family intermediary, would then pay the Biden family incrementally. These payments to the Biden family, which in fact originated from foreign national corporations, were structured in a way to conceal the source of the funds and reduce the conspicuousness of the total amounts made into the Biden bank accounts. While it's no secret that the Biden family, and especially Hunter, enriched themselves through Joe Biden, the House Oversight Memo does an excellent job of laying out how much we didn't know. So there's Romanian payments, all these Romanian people. Then Chinese payments, a lot from China, mostly from China. That seems to be the largest source. Millions of dollars here and there, energy companies. So then he asked, what's next? The House Oversight has made significant progress in their investigation, but a lot left to do. And they're still trying to get FBI and DOJ records that allegedly describe a criminal scheme involving then Vice President Joe Biden and an unnamed foreign national. So they got to get more stuff. We'll see what goes on. The sort of smoking gun in all of this, by the way, and you're going to hear everyone, New York Times, they didn't find anything, right? Well, in a sense, it's true. They didn't find anything. There's no services being sold. That's the smoking gun. right? The smoking gun in this whole case is there's no service. There's there's no invoice item, right? So I invoice people working on a conference invoice, right? Who doesn't do that, right? Who doesn't in their invoices, if you're an independent contractor, say at least what you're invoicing for? I mean, that's just what invoices look like. So anyone that I invoice, I'll put what I did, right? I did these things. I try to keep it simple. I don't try and keep a travel log of every moment of time that I spent on that contract, but I certainly give a title for which you can explain 95% of the work that I did. And so that's the whole smoking gun here. They didn't find any services. There's nothing, which is indicative of influence peddling, right? If there's no service, if you're not actually providing a good or a service, and yet there's an invoice going out, well, there's only one other thing. It's influence peddling. It's being paid to access this realm of contacts and influence and all those other things. So there you go. Now, one of the funny things about this is that we talk a lot about synchronicity and coincidences happening around time of change in particular. We try to think about it in our own lives for noticing when we're on the right path or the wrong path, and you see signs and you see coincidences. And usually, if you believe in Jungian psychology, those things are really important, right? Those are clear indications of whether or not you're on the right path or the wrong path. And so people like myself who do put a lot of faith in Jungian psychoanalysis and Jungian systems of guiding your life and strengthening your mental health, right? So we believe all that stuff. The whole point of this synchronicity thing, to me, reveals a pretty interesting opportunity for Bitcoin. So remember, we've been talking for a long time about how the Bank Secrecy Act and following all of these signs, follow the money and all that stuff actually comes from the LBJ era, when the US government was very concerned about protesting, especially about Vietnam, especially about what happened to JFK, people asking too many questions, what do we do? So the whole point of bank secrecy and that frame comes from that 1964 era. A lot of people think the Bitcoin story actually begins in 1971 with the abdication of the gold standard for the US dollar and the redeemability of the US dollar for gold. And, what happened in 1971, everyone loves that Twitter handle, real fun, right? But we've been saying the actual story begins when LBJ takes office, simply because that's when the deputization of the financial system becomes paramount in order to understand where dissent is coming from, where protest is coming from. It was never done to find out where the criminals were, money laundering and all that stuff. It was for rooting out dissent, systemic dissent using the financial system. So it was deputizing the financial system to help the government root out any form of communist control, and then it turned into terrorism after, right? So I've admitted many times on this broadcast how embarrassing it was to even for a minute believe in the not that I was ever a fan of the Iraq War, but to even believe for a minute that the American system could have been trusted with something like the Patriot Act, which I at one point thought we could do, right? I really did. Completely wrong. And we see now that the deputization of the financial sector was really about control within America. So the irony, the beautiful, hilarious irony would be if, and we talk about Elon's razor here all the time, that the world will tend towards the most entertaining outcome. So again, how many times have I said, watching Biden just be himself is one of the most amazing punishments you could have hoped for someone like him. He's corrupt his whole career, makes it to president at exactly the time when he's no longer really capable of lying like he once was, where his mind just isn't quite sharp enough anymore to do the things he used to be able to do. And he was a great deflector, right? He was an excellent orator in his own way. A little angry, I don't like the anger thing that he always was doing. He did it even when he was young. People say it's just his sundowner time now that he's old, but he was pretty angry. You watch some of those fiery speeches when he was young, but they were effective, right? He actually could string together logic, and it was, an effective bruising of an opponent or an idea when he would actually sink his teeth into it. He was good on the Senate floor. in those, canned environments. So he had those talents at one point. That's how he became the vice president. But watching him now doing what he does is perfect, right? Watching this marble-brained fella try to explain away what he's doing is a good show, right? So lots of people reacted yesterday about what he did, but the interesting part is he, at the same time, the Department of Justice found time yesterday. So the millions of dollars with Biden, who cares, right? We're not even going to give documents, they say. But what did they have time for? Well, Cernovich was warning about this. So he says, how do Republican goobers keep falling for this? The House had to find the Hunter Biden documents themselves. Several crimes proven. The Department of Justice, rather than indict, held a Santos case as insurance. So George Santos, who we love, the golden age of fraud. He's the perfect congressman for this time and place. Everything about the guy is hilarious, right? He denied being a transvestite for a long time, and then whoops, that was me. I am a transvestite, which we're totally fine with, right? Very pro LGBTQ plus here on the Breakup. So George Santos trying to get dressed up as a woman, great, right? No problem. But that he lied about it, got caught lying, and then was like, "Oh shucks." It's pretty good stuff, right? So they arrested him yesterday, right? And what did they arrest him over, right? So Cernovich says, right, rather than indict any of the Bidens, they held the Santos case as insurance. And then on the day where the Oversight Committee's press conference about the Bidens is happening, they go and arrest George Santos. So there's something else to talk about. Well, what did they get George Santos on in the end? So the Department of Justice charged the Republican Congress member for 2 unemployment checks that he received across state lines for $564 each. And will probably just be paperwork errors, right? So I was kind of wrong. I think I even said a few days ago that whatever the House Oversight Committee, I think I said it yesterday, it was probably going to be like one of these, you didn't handle the documents correctly and we don't know what happened and whoops. In the end, it was nothing like that, right? It was way more indictable than I had imagined. I thought it was just going to be another one of these, some people didn't do the thing they were supposed to do, and it might be a crime if you really think about it. Who knows? One second. So this Santos thing, I think, just butts up really well with what's going on with Biden, and seeing them next to each other, the 2 $564 checks. That's what they had in evidence, right? That's actually it. I think it's just a perfect contrast to what's going on with Biden, and the New York Times headline is perfect. I mean, you can't ask for better than this, right? So it brings me to another hearing that we had yesterday, and this was from Brad Sherman. Brad Sherman. Right? So Brad Sherman, first of all, we don't like making fun of people's looks, right? We're not. That's not what happens here, right? We're not just sitting around calling people ugly and fat. We're totally against fat shaming. We don't want to do it. And someone's looks aren't even an argument, right? That's not an argument. You can't make a point just by someone's physiognomy, right? But just watching his devilish laugh while he said the following, right? So what did he say? The following is, the crypto bros made over $1 trillion out of thin air, he says. They'll accuse the US government of making money out of thin air. And he says, maybe we do. But when he says this, he says, we're the US government, and he gets like a really good Joker laugh. And so now Walker America, the crypto couple guy, Marty Bent, everyone commenting with this smile. There's even a remix song out now called We Are the US Government, with the smile, and his face kind of rotates around. And again, I've said it many, many times. So the Marty Bent tweet that went a little viral, he says, the mask is off, but the mask being that this guy's wearing a smile up to here, laughing about how they're the US government and they can kind of do whatever they want, right? So I've said it for a long time. I've said it for a long time that our best weapon as Bitcoiners is laughing at things. That's why I think we were one of the first communities to embrace Clown World as a motif, as a thing we can use regularly to laugh at, right? We've been laughing at things like Moscow Time for a long time. All of these things, these are our weapons, right? In the same way that aircraft carriers and bullets and armies were a huge deal in World War II, the mimetic capacity of laughing is probably the best weapon. Laughing at these people is one of the best things we can do, right? Absolutely one of the best things we can do. And last night on television, one of the greatest instances of laughing at these people happened because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump did his CNN town hall last night, and you forget what you love about the guy when you don't see him for a long time. When you don't see Trump and his humor, you forget. You really do forget, right? So what did Trump do last night? So Trump did this town hall, right? And it should be a lesson to all Bitcoiners. I mean, we are already hilarious. All right. So there's enough comedy, there's enough laughter. The memes are always good. We got plenty of laughter and plenty of ammo, right, to keep going at these guys. And they just keep producing more Clown World situations for us to laugh at. Santos and Biden, you know, even putting them together in a news cycle in order to see the contrast was excellent for a lot of people. Seeing those two things happen at once, Santos gets indicted and arrested. And Biden, you know, I still don't know if he's going to face consequences for all this, by the way, right? I'm not necessarily predicting he has to pay legal system consequences. I do believe we're going to get to it towards the end of this. I do believe he's going to pay political consequences. I think that the Democrats are going to have to rethink their strategy here. But anyway, last night, Trump on the CNN thing was just perfect. He was funny. If you didn't see it, you got to go watch. It ends up sounding, the audio in the background with the amount of audience laughing looked like a sitcom in a sense. And the laughter came in the same waves. Everyone at once giggling for just enough time. Trump always with the good timing, knows how to wait for them to stop laughing, knows how to hit a punchline. He just had the entire audience in the palm of his hand the entire time, laughing at everything he had to say. I mean, he was able to brush off January 6th things to laughter. He was able to brush off the sexual abuse thing with laughter. Now, tons of reactions today, right? Tons and tons of reactions. So first of all, Benjamin Braddock had a lot to say. He says, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump were the only GOP presidents to understand the importance of media attention on the national stage. In a sense, Trump is the spiritual successor to Reagan's legacy. Braddock goes on to say, Trump is handling the extremely hostile interviewer really well. One of the biggest strengths as a politician is his ability to spar with jackals in the press and come away without a scratch. The antagonism seems to energize him. And it definitely does, right? It definitely does. Another one where Liberty Lockdown with Clint Russell says this is the most hilarious 2 minutes I've seen from a politician since they were in office. Other people calling it comedy gold, right? Then you get Mook Juice. This is a Cernovich retweet. He says, this is why everyone loves him. I can criticize the guy all day long on legitimate things, but he's so funny and charismatic. And he is, right? Here's another one. My wife was getting sick of Trump until tonight. She was so turned off and disgusted by that Caitlyn creature. She couldn't watch anymore and went to bed. Went to bed respecting Trump. Ha ha ha. Backfire for CNN. Cernovich saying, indeed, that Trump won tonight, that's for sure. Cernovich going on to say, the reactions from shit libs about the CNN town hall with Trump says more than any Trump supporter could. They are big mad and want the cord pulled, because indeed, a lot of people were going on and on and on about what he had said, right? So he had a couple other zingers here. You know, you can't get a fair trial in DC. You can't get a fair trial in New York. His story about the rape thing was hilarious. like hilarious, the sexual battery thing. So he goes, this woman says I met her in a doorway and I brought her into the changing room and within a couple of minutes and tried to make out with her. He's like, I own buildings all around that shopping place where I met her. I would just take her there. Going into all of that stuff. So the reactions now on the other side. So AOC, CNN should be ashamed of themselves. They have lost total control of this town hall to again be manipulated into platforming election disinformation, defenses of January 6th, and a public attack on a sexual abuse victim. The audience is cheering him and laughing at the host. Yeah, her cat named Vagina. That's what he says. At one point, yeah, this woman's nuts. Her cat is named Vagina. So the audience was laughing and cheering him on, right? They indeed were. This falls squarely on CNN. Everyone here saw exactly what was going to happen. Instead, they put a sexual abuse victim in harm's way for views. This was a choice to platform lies about the election on January 6th with no plan but to have their moderator interrupted without blah, 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 blah. So some people saying, stay mad, ha, ha, ha. So there you go. This was sickening, shame on us, some people were saying. The funny part is Jake Tapper came on after. So Jake Tapper, there was a thing recently when Fox had that huge, whatever, the settlement with Dominion or whatever it was. And Jake Tapper did this thing where he went and tried to like hold in his laughter. He was like announcing it on CNN that they had to pay this thing. Now, the payment for the you remember the kids with the MAGA hat, and there was a fake guy, and they said they were fighting him, and it was not even close to that, and he was a Native American or something like that. And in the end, Nick, I can't remember his name. I want to say Santos because of the guy. I don't think it's that. Nick Sandmann. So Nick Sandmann ended up making, I think it was $250 million. So just a little less than the settlement for Dominion for the same thing, right? And watching Jake Tapper, now I try not to get angry about things. I do. I'm good at it, right? I normally don't let things bug me, but seeing him do that made me say, I want this guy to taste some revenge. And I got it last night because he's sitting there, and after everything that went on with Trump and it was, 70 minutes of people laughing, people engaged, him handling what they think are the most serious subjects, January 6th, and he just flicked it all away. I mean, just flicked it away like it was nothing. Water on his back. And a lot of people saying Jake Tapper looked like he was going to cry when he was talking with Anderson Cooper. They were both like really low energy, and Jake Tapper looked honestly like he was going to cry, and people brought that up. You have Richard Grinnell saying Jake Tapper's voice is shaking, laugh out loud. And he's now hosting a panel where every single person agrees, no dissenting voice. CNN has to make wholesale changes if they want to get out of last place. So a lot of other people talking about that, about him crying, and one of the big reactions being that. So all of these things put together mean that, and here's a War Clandestine talking about it. All Trump did was expose CNN viewers to a little bit of truth, and the left are hissing like demons exposed to holy water, screeching and writhing in disapproval like vampires in the sunlight. It's quite a fascinating yet disturbing phenomena to witness. And indeed, that's kind of what you see, right? You saw these people getting so angry, freaking out, losing their minds. And even, the E.G. Carroll case, right? Even that one, it's like, the jury already found her to have lied about being raped, right? So that's already in a case, right? But now they hold Trump liable for defamation for saying that Carroll lied about that. That's what the whole case was. The sexual battery, right, is about Trump liable for defamation for saying that Carroll lied about being raped. That's it. right? That she lied. None of it makes sense, obviously. That's why everyone's sort of laughing about it, and that's why it had no amplification yesterday. And people who are paying attention, and that's why some people were so defensive about it yesterday. Oh, it's rape, it's all these things, because they can't actually get into the details of what happens, because in the end it looks exactly what it should look like, the manipulation of the legal system in order to frame a narrative and a story that can only make sense to people who are reading spin, right? If you read the real details, there's nothing there. If you know how to spin the ball, send it into the environment, then you're going to get what you want. So that's a big part of what's going on. This humor thing and our ability to laugh at Clown World and what Trump did last night, getting everyone to laugh at January 6th, is the only way out for him on that file, right? You can't sit there and say, well, I did not mean to start an insurrection. I did not want to start a revolution, right? You already lost. You already lost if you start with that. But what he did here, by making this funny, by turning the humor up, by being irreverent. We've been talking about irreverence and its important role in hyperbitcoinization for a long time. We can't revere the old system. You can't be like, well, that guy's from Harvard, and so his argument is great. Now, I got a lot of respect for people who go to Harvard, right? Absolutely. Absolutely, right? I'm not saying anything about that, but it isn't an argument. It doesn't make you right about anything. Millions of people have gone to Harvard. Millions. Most of them stupid, right? Well, I wouldn't say that. That's an exaggeration. Many of them wrong about many things, right? So the irreverence, a Harvard degree does not make you an expert on fractional reserve banking. Not even close, right? Not even close. So the idea from here that comedy can continue to be used, I think, as one of our primary weapons, further evidenced by what Trump did last night, by what we're doing with Brad Sherman today. You got to see these pictures of this ridiculous laugh of his and his face spinning around, and we are the US government, and it looks like an evil laugh, right? It really looks like the Joker laughing about winning something, right? So it just couldn't be more perfect. So we're going to have good laughs on that today. But it's not just laughter, right? Comedy is a big part of it, but courage is another part. So Trump showed a lot of courage last night, even being able to go up there and make these jokes about things that he knows other people are serious about, like January 6th, that he's able to diffuse with comedy. Does take courage. You can't deny he's courageous, but maybe not courageous enough, right? We've been talking for a long time about his last day in office, and it's why I don't want to defend Trump anymore, why I don't really totally support him as president for 2024 at all, right? At all. I don't want to have to deal with every single thing he says, and then we come here in the morning and I try and explain what Trump did again today, and I could do it, right? I usually know where he's headed with something, even if it looks inflammatory and crazy, and I have a pretty good gauge on his understanding of how to manipulate the system, and I can get it wrong. I've rarely been wrong, right? The NFT cards were probably the only time I doubted his capacity, and I was wrong within 10 split seconds. Once the thing sold out, it was a huge moneymaker and all that, right? And we've talked a lot about how Trump has this quality to not let himself get embarrassed. He can't get embarrassed. It seems like he's without shame. And that's something that we as Bitcoiners have to always take as an example for what we're going through, because people are going to keep laughing at us, right? They're going to laugh at, oh, you think Bitcoin can solve this? I mean, how many times has that been used by people who doubt Bitcoin or don't want to argue with you or debate Bitcoin, central banking, what's going on in the economy? They'll just laugh, right? And it's most prevalent in my life anyway, with the people who are the most well-educated, as you could imagine, right? And they think they have it all figured out, and they're reading the Atlantic and the New York Times, and they're pretty sure Biden is just sort of misunderstood. He's been a good president, and he's got some trouble with his son, and who doesn't, right? Like that's sort of what the high IQs are talking about. So you've got to have that same capacity that Trump has to resist being ashamed of something and being embarrassed, and being able to have courage to get over that. But Trump's courage, which is there, I'm not saying he's not courageous, has its limits. And we saw it, I think we saw it on his last day in office, and we've talked about it many times about how he didn't pardon Assange and Ross and Ed, and he didn't release the JFK information. And again, we've mentioned it many times. Why? He said, well, if you'd have seen what I've seen. Well, what did he see? Right? I'm just guessing he saw a threat to himself and his family, which I understand. I get it, right? I totally get why he would do that. I totally get it. No fault, no harm, no foul. But please don't say you're going to do it this time, because it's less believable because you had a chance to do it. And now you got to win a whole nother election just to do the thing you could have done before, right? He didn't do it. And so one person we see who has courage to do that is RFK. And now RFK talking about this stuff more and more, right? And he mentioned something. Let me find the exact piece here. He talked about doing, let me just find the actual quote, because this is what he says. Let's see what he says. I'm not sure if I saved this one in the right order. That's why. Let me just see. And it's about RFK. And what he says is, I'm going to finish the job that my uncle started. But I want to find the exact quote because it was excellent. It was really excellent. Just a second. So RFK, by the way, was on Hannity last night, right? So he was on Hannity last night and did excellent. I'll explain that in a moment. He was also on Mark Stein's show recently. So he's been doing a lot of media. Let's just see where the heck this is. Anyway, I don't think I saved it the way I thought I did. I don't want to have to look through everything. So what he says is, I will do the thing that my uncle said, and I will scatter it into the wind. He used the exact quote that everyone knows, that I will scatter it into thousands of pieces into the wind. So he said that yesterday, right? Now, a lot of people saying, you better watch out, RFK. And indeed, we better be careful next week at our event. We got to keep him safe and secure. And he will be. We've got great people on that. So the two things he did last night, right? So he went and showed just tremendous courage, right? Just tremendous courage. So first of all, he goes onto Hannity and debates Hannity about environmentalism, and I think staked out his actual environmental position, which is almost unbeatable. I mean, almost unbeatable. He's done this a few times, right? You really got to notice the talent and the skill that RFK has when you see him get out of these problems that would confound most people. You know, when they said the one I mentioned the other day, how are you going to bring American people together? Right now, you can come up with all kinds of spinny right wing, left. They got to stop doing this, and they got to stop doing this, and if this party wouldn't do that, we would bring people together, right? If Republicans just wouldn't hate people, and if Democrats would just understand systems and not goals, they would be better, right? Well, what was his answer? They got to stop lying to the American people. That's it. He did it, right? He found the perfect answer. I've heard him do it on environmentalism. I've heard him do it in the vaccine situation, right? You know, I was worried at first because of all of his stuff on vaccines from before, that he said that he would be sort of damaged, that he would have gotten things wrong. But he's been so consistent with what he said about vaccines and is able to actually defend against any of these, oh, you believe in science, or you don't believe in science arguments, right? He totally figured that out as well by simply saying, no, look, the scientific standards were abandoned years ago, and he understands the corruption of the system, right? He literally understands the corruption of the system. So that's been a big advantage. So he goes on with his environmental thing to Hannity last night, and Hannity questions him, right? So here's how it goes. Here's how it goes. So Hannity, of course, can't figure out what's going on, right? So he confuses real environmentalism with CO2 hysteria. So he says, he starts trying to tell him, oh, you're all about environmentalism and stopping this from getting built and stopping pollution. Well, you believe in global warming. So he says, I'm not that kind of environmentalist. And he says that our air and water are being poisoned. Drug companies are pumping out harmful and ineffective products to tens of millions of Americans. Our food isn't real. Our soil is depleted, and that's why our population is sick. And so Hannity comes back with, so you will fix this by promising to never fly on a jet again. I mean, he destroyed Hannity in one move there, right? He forced Hannity to not understand the difference between propaganda about global warming and pollution. And that's exactly what RFK does. He ends up just ending Hannity by saying the following. Those are the big polluters that actually destroy the environment, are the ones who are getting you to focus on greenhouse gas in order to distract you from the actual crimes they're committing. Right. So just a perfect framing. I mean, really perfect. And I think almost anyone would believe that. Whether or not it's true doesn't really matter. That's a very believable. We are prone to believe that kind of framing just because you put you keep the enemy as the corporation, which most people are interested or easily susceptible to believing. So he managed to get that one right. And then he also, if you put that in people criticizing him, oh, maybe he's an an op, right? To you get Dom Lucre, who plays around with reality or says the opposite of what he actually means in a lot of tweets in order to get engagement. But he says RFK is not running to win. He's running to get independent votes away from Trump when he announces loss and urges voters to choose Biden. And Benjamin Braddock says here, RFK is not a DNC op. His voters are not going to back to the guy who mandated vaccines for workers. If anything, his run benefits Trump in two ways: by pulling support from DeSantis in the primaries and by highlighting the Biden administration's corruption and incompetence. The man is taking on the most powerful and entrenched special interests in American history. He's exposing the lies and propaganda for what they are. Do you really think that the DNC is behind the guy who is telling the public about the link between all of these medications and mass shootings? And indeed, that's the other interview that he had yesterday. So he went on Mark Stein, who we love, Mark Stein, and said that the psychiatric drugs that people are getting in America are probably the reason why we have so many mass shootings. He says, this might be the first time I've ever heard this is Benjamin Braddock again, I've ever heard a presidential candidate bring up psychiatric drugs when asked about mass shootings. There are other causes as well, but the link is established. And in any case, the widespread use of these medications has turned what would be a transient issue for many public into a chronic mental illness. And he even talks about the business plan for these drugs. You get addicted to one serotonin booster, and then all of a sudden it's an endorphin booster to make up for the problems you had with the serotonin thing, and on and on and on and on, right? And the percentage of Americans that are living like that is getting greater and greater. So he's jumping into the breach on all kinds of issues in the environment, taking a totally different stance on the mass shootings. He's calling it the responsibility of the drug companies. You know how much courage this takes? The Republicans won't do shit like this, right? They're too afraid about donors. They're too afraid about raising money. They would never, ever, ever say it's because of the pharmaceutical industry that we get these massive shootings. You might get one or two congressmen, but the majority are not going to talk like that, right? It's just not going to happen. And then what does he do, right? Not only did he make that CIA spread to the wind comment, right? He also talks and is openly talking about the CIA being involved in the murder and the cover-up of his uncle, and that the evidence is now overwhelming. So look at all these issues we're seeing him be courageous on. Now, he's not as funny as Trump, right? We love the funny, right? We love the humor. It's great. Humor all day. But courage is important too, right? And we're seeing courage come from him day in and day out. Now, he did say yesterday, this is something some people are talking about, and he did come out and say, because we speculated on this a long time ago, that they would make a joint Donald Trump RFK ticket. So he says yesterday, RFK, just to quell any speculation, under no circumstances will I join Donald Trump on an election ticket. Our positions on certain fundamental issues, our approaches to governance, and our philosophies of leadership could not be further apart. He goes on to, anyway, he just says it's not going to happen, right? So, yeah, I'd sort of said that a little while ago too. Probably not, but the Vivek Ramaswamy thing, I think, is real. And if Vivek has already been talking about that as well, if you could make, because there's no way he's not getting cheated out. Now, if he does get cheated out, RFK, I predict this is possible. I think he'll have the courage again to do this, to go on a cross-party ticket. It could happen, right? So, so in the case of RFK, the Democrats might need him in the end, right? What I see going on with Biden here, I don't think they can put this to rest. I don't think the New York Times headline is going to cover it. I don't think them saying nothing happened, I mean, literally just saying nothing happened, I don't think that's going to cut it. And I think you are going to get a situation where they might have to embrace RFK. If they embrace him, he's going to win easily. I mean, easily, right? Now, if they keep coming with the headwinds and the cheating and the trickery like we see in New Hampshire right now, if you keep seeing that, if it does indeed look like they're going to take an established candidate and run that person through the whole system in order to cheat RFK out of his chance, then I do think you're going to see him have the courage to create a cross-party ticket with someone like Vivek. I won't completely rule out the Trump story, but in general, I think Trump is, the energy, even if he had the great night last night, I just don't think he's over the target as much as someone like RFK is right now. That things can change, right? Things can change. But the main lesson here is that both of them are showing Bitcoiners what we need to be successful, right? And it is comedy and it is courage. It's the two things, right? You have to have the courage to not be embarrassed, the courage to continue to say Bitcoin fixes this. Even Bitcoiners will give you shit for saying Bitcoin fixes this, by the way, right? Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed that. But even Bitcoiners, oh, it's so easy to say Bitcoin doesn't fix that, right? Whenever there's something found that Bitcoin doesn't fix that Bitcoiners are sure about, they want to smash the cliche of suggesting that Bitcoin fixes everything. Bitcoin really does fix everything, guys. Sorry, maybe not literally, but if you fix the money, you're going to fix incentive systems. And there's a bunch of stuff that it doesn't fix, of course, right? But aligning people in a better direction will make those other seemingly unrelated problems disappear. Now, I'm sure we're still going to have plenty of problems, even on a Bitcoin standard. So indeed, there is a world where Bitcoin doesn't fix everything. But all the things that ail us right now in our systems, Bitcoin indeed does fix. So you have to continue to have the courage to say that, no matter what people say, no matter how much they laugh. This is my third cycle now, and I was laughed at in 2015, laughed at again in 2019, laughed at these days, right? Oh, so much going on in the world. Why are you still doing this Bitcoin thing, right? People lose contact with what happened just 2 years ago and 6 years ago and whatnot. So you got to have courage to do that. And then the comedy part, right? It's laughing at the Sherman guy, laughing at all these things, and simply not getting caught up in the anger. What are we going to do about this terrible Biden thing? Or what about Trump not respecting the legal system, right? You can't get angry about these things. We have to laugh at them. We have to have the courage to say what we mean about how Bitcoin fixes things. And I think we're going to be fine as long as we do those two things. That's all we're going to need. It's literally that simple, right? And also don't get conscripted into a war and go fight for Ukraine or Taiwan or any of these places. Don't do that, right? So, but we're getting close. We're getting close. We're there. Let's see what some of the comments say today. All right. All right. My hypothesis, I think CNN wanted to demonize him and ended up humanizing him. Yeah, no, they've underestimated him too many times now. And this was another example of that, indeed. Or it could just be them wanting ratings. I mean, they're trying to turn over a new leaf, and I can't imagine they're going to keep their talent base the exact same as it is. And you could feel the energy shift yesterday. Fox was just like this weak network that had to put Hannity on RFK to try and create some correlated drama, and it was so flat and stupid that it was a nothing. Right? Nothing happened. Nobody watched. There might even be a chance that Fox didn't hit 1 million viewers last night because Trump was sucking so much air to the room, and they're screwed without Tucker anymore. So there you go. P-Man Van, you can always count on AOC for over the top drama. You sure can. Yeah, she is nothing if not over the top. I call it judicial fox hunting. Yeah, it's pretty much like that. Make believe Hollywood scripts. His last day. So Daniel, I would say the COVID response thing is a little tougher because it's fog of war and nobody knew, right? Now, I would say he was not willing enough to speak out against the people who clearly wasn't on his side, like Deborah. His thing with like the here's where he got wrong with the COVID response. Things like the drinking bleach hoax. Remember, he apologized and said he misspoke, even though that was pure fake news. He didn't seem to have confidence, and he let people like Deborah Birx and Fauci lie openly about him, right? I only knew Fauci and decided Fauci was 100% untrustworthy. Well, you knew with the masks, the flip-flop on the mask at the beginning. But the minute he started to buy into the bleach hoax and the bleach hoax, I don't know if he ever said anything about Charlottesville, but if he did, but I think just the bleach hoax is enough. He knows that there is something called a disinfectant, that light is a disinfectant, and you can have it projected into your lungs. So, he said injected or whatever he called it, but he should have done more with the people he knew were openly hostile to him. As far as some of the stuff, I mean, it's bad for his legacy, but he had to make a choice, and I don't know if they were really right or wrong choices necessarily at the time. But that, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. You're right. I mean, his COVID response is a liability to him. So I'm only slightly disagreeing. It wasn't enough for me to say he's not capable of being president a second time. I guess that's what I'm saying. The last day in office and the no pardons and the not really singling out the deep state as an enemy and getting his reinforcements. I mean, it could have been his last day in office could have been like the end of that Endgame movie. It really could have been that, right? It could have been him against all the deep state, and he could have just said, all right. And then you had Ed Snowden and Julian Assange come out of a portal, and they would wipe these people from the face of the earth. Right? I mean, they would have been really effective. Imagine Ed Snowden coming back to America. Imagine even saying they get a trial or something in America, public trial. Something like that could have been enough, right? Instead, we got running away. Talking about banking. Yeah, well, that's not going to stop, bud. That looks like it's baked into the system now. Things are going to get wild. Can't wait for some of these future Moscow times to come. Yeah, there's some good ones out there. There's some really good ones. Notifications did not work this AM for your pod. Oh no. I only put the thing up, I only load it into my Restream, whatever I use to get it loaded up on YouTube to go live. I only usually do that at around 7:40 a.m. Eastern. So 20 minutes before is when I load it up. So you don't usually see a upcoming broadcast until sort of right before broadcast. So I don't know how well notifications really work. Believe the Scientology. RFK Jr. Isn't he? Yeah, indeed, Daniel. It doesn't rule out Vivek, and I think that's I think that's where it's headed. Honestly, I think that's where it's headed. It's so funny to me when Bitcoiners get mad at me for saying that and then go on to say how broken money Exactly. You know what I'm talking about in HBDC. Even Bitcoiners will tell you, oh, quit it with the cliches, right? No, you can't be afraid to be embarrassed about what you think. We're not here for a big high IQ treatise on Bitcoin. We're here to make savings easy again. And if you make savings easy again, you change the time preference of people. And if you change the time preference of people, all kinds of amazing things get unlocked. And that's really what we're talking about. It's not a thing where you need to understand how Bitcoin works fundamentally, and then you'll understand how the world can be better. No one is going to become a Bitcoin engineer in order to fix the money, right? The point of Bitcoin is that it's for the low IQs too, right? Like they don't need to understand everything that's going on with it. That enough people do is important, right? But not everyone. Rand Moore says Bitcoin fixed me. It did a lot of people, man, and that's what I mean, right? It's all about accountability to yourself, right? That's a big part of it. He met with RFK right before he caved. That's the I wonder if DeSantis. Yeah, DeSantis did meet with RFK. I don't know who else you're referring to. I just finished a piece about something I'm working on, and I dare to say it's either really good, but I can, if you wouldn't mind reading it sometimes. Yeah, for sure, HBDC, send it to me. I'm a little busy the next week, but happy to do so. Henry. All in Bitcoin payment strategy first. Don't know what that all means. Thank you, Ilona. And of course, if anyone here would like to read it, yeah, cool, HBDC, please. I can't forgive him for Operation Warp Speed. Yeah. Yeah. We want an even playing field. Is that too much to ask? Indeed. Bitcoin continues to fix me, brother. Indeed, my man. Yeah, so we have it here. RFK on Nostr now. Daniel's saying he met with Trump. Did he really? Trump met with RFK. Didn't know. RFK and Nostr. I'm going to go add RFK and Nostr, though. That's great. Good news for RFK. Smart guy. He's got good advisors, I would say. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Thanks for joining. I had a great time. I'll see you tomorrow morning.